Jesus Christ may have been a good human being who lived in the first century. He may even have been a reformer who opposed the religious authoritarianism of his time. Muslims wrongly claim that he was a prophet. And the Christians who wrote the Bible went even further by portraying him as God himself. In the New Testament of the Bible, the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were all written with the goal of presenting Jesus as divine. And for that purpose, they attribute many miracles to him. Among those stories, one particular miracle, which Jesus never actually performed, was invented by the author of the Gospel of John in chapter number 2. A wedding was taking place in a town called Cana, pronounced Cana in Western countries, though Indian Christians usually say Cana. During the ceremony, the wine ran out. And by wine, it was not today's grape juice. It was fermented alcohol, the intoxicating drink people consumed in those days. Without refrigeration or preservation, any grape juice would ferment naturally within days. So the only wine people had in those days was alcoholic wine. When the wine ran out, Jesus supposedly asked the servants to fix 6 stone jars with water, and he miraculously turned the water into wine. This, according to John's Gospel, was the first miracle Jesus performed. But in reality, Jesus never did any such miracle. The author of John simply wrote this story to portray Jesus as divine, nothing more. Why did the author of John add such a false event into the Bible? What is the background behind this? In those days, the Greek-Roman world worshipped many gods. One of the most prominent among them was Dionysus, the god of fertility, ecstasy, and most importantly, wine. Dionysus was the god responsible for making sure wine never ran out, so that people could continue drinking, celebrating, and indulging in intoxication. It is precisely such people, worshippers of gods like Dionysus, whom the author of John was targeting. To convince them that Jesus was greater than their gods, he wrote this story. You can see on the screen the many myths about Dionysus performing wine-related miracles. By writing that Jesus turned water into wine at the wedding, what was John trying to say? He wanted to claim, look, Jesus is greater than Dionysus. When there was no wine for the crowd at the wedding, see how Jesus miraculously produced so much wine for everyone. This was John's intention. Otherwise, Jesus would never have performed such a trivial and absurd miracle. If Jesus was a good human being, would he create large quantities of intoxicating alcohol for a crowd that had already finished drinking? Of course not. Now, to understand how far John was willing to exaggerate and fabricate stories to make Jesus appear divine, look at another example from the Bible. In John chapter 20 verses 30 to 31, the author openly admits his intention. He says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written, that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Here, John himself states his purpose clearly. He is writing these stories so that everyone will believe Jesus is the Son of God. In other words, God himself. Then in the very next chapter, John 21 verse 25, he goes even further. He says, Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. Look at the exaggeration. Christians themselves admit that the 4 Gospels together contain all the miracles attributed to Jesus during his 3-year ministry. That is why there are 4 Gospels, otherwise even one would have been enough. If everything Jesus did is already written in these 4 books, how can John claim that the whole world would not be able to contain the books needed to record the rest? The New Testament itself is a small book that fits in our hand. Only around 5% of it talks about the life of Jesus. Other than that, what countless books does John imagine? This is blatant exaggeration. From this, we must understand that John wrote many such embellished stories to turn Jesus into a god. He attributed miracles to Jesus that Jesus never performed. The stories in the Gospels were written by human authors who deliberately portrayed Jesus as divine. As we have seen, they fabricated miracles to convince readers that Jesus was God.